The purpose of today's discussion is to give you an update on the strategic plan, the strategic planning process. It's been going on for some months now. It started when it was just getting warm, and it's just about to get real cold for winter. And it's been an invigorating process. We're going to give you an update, but we also would invite input at a certain point. So we've left a chunk of time to provide input or ask questions, and to the extent that we can, we'll invite that. We're continuing to ask for input because we still got a ways to go yet. If you don't want to give it today, there's also a website, wayne.edu/strategic plan, where you can provide input, and the latest draft of the plan is on that site. Here's the agenda for today. When I'm finished, I'm going to welcome to the podium Akosia Barthwell Evans from the Barthwell Group. They're the consultant that's been helping us through the strategic planning process. The president will give an overview of Wayne State University values and some of the major strategic themes that have emerged. Provost Winters will then provide some of the specific goals under each of the strategic focus areas. Then we'll leave a chunk of time to hear from you. We've also had some questions that have been submitted through the online invitation process and some other input that's come in through the website. Following that, Rick Nork will close this out, our Vice President for, our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, sorry Rick, and Vice President for Operations. And then we'll proceed. We expect this to be done in January, roughly. But the final plan really is the beginning, because that's when the work begins. So we're going to spend some time creating tactical plans to support this strategic plan. And that's really the important stuff. Sometimes we tend to think of tactics as not as important somehow as the strategy, but that's the action. That's how the tactical support and execution are what make the plans a reality. Eisenhower once said that plans are nothing, planning is everything. And I don't necessarily agree with the front part of that statement, because this plan, when it's completed, will be our roadmap. But I do agree with that planning, with the second part, because the planning has been a rich process. We've heard from people on campus, off campus, all around, and those discussions have been valuable, and they've been rich. Sometimes they've been very passionate, but they've all been important, and all the material that we've gathered through that process, you may not see it in the strategic plan, but it will inform our tactical plan, or it will be part of our tactical plan. And that's critical, because that's how we make it happen. And as I said, we've had input from stakeholders, and we continue to welcome input as we go along. I'm going to bring to the stage in a moment Akosia Barthwell Evans. Akosia is the CEO of the Barthwell Group, and they have been our strategic partners and consultants through this process. Strategic planning, if you haven't been involved in it, it's complex, especially for a complex organization like Wayne State. It can be a messy process. So it was very helpful to have the Barthwell Group in the organization of the planning process, which included a lot of scheduling and meetings and things like that, but also gather and help us synthesize the disparate input we've had from lots of folks and many different stakeholders, and also provide benchmarking information from other universities that have gone through this process. At this point, it would be remiss of me to not mention Lisa Schrader, sitting in the second row here, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Wayne State, who has been so valuable, too, in the organization of this planning process. Akosia has close ties to Wayne State, close ties to Detroit. She's been a very valuable partner. So, Akosia, why don't you come right on up?
Good morning, and let me thank you, Michael, for that introduction and emphasize again how proud the Barthwell Group is to be part of this process. Because as Michael mentioned, my father was an alum, my brother was an alum, and my cousin for many years was a vice president at this university. So Wayne State has certainly influenced my life. And although we are consultants that have worked with higher education institutions throughout the country, and although we are based in 7 states, this has been a very special engagement for us. So thank you for the opportunity. And as Michael said, we have a full program here today. And so what I'm going to do is to kind of talk to you about the strategic planning process. When we were hired by the university, one of the things that the president emphasized was the importance of having an engaged process. He did not want a top-down mandate that everyone would be expected to follow. He wanted to hear the voices of multiple stakeholders to shape this plan. And I'm happy to say that we believe we have accomplished that. So since June, we've met with the Strategic Planning Committee approximately 6 times. That committee is comprised of faculty, administrators, and we had a student representative. We've also met with the focus groups, and we've had 5 of those 3 times. And those are representing, excuse me, students, faculty, staff, administrators, and alumni. But I think the remarkable thing about this process, and we've participated in quite a few, has been the enthusiasm and the engagement. So in addition to the formal meetings, subgroups of both the Strategic Planning Committee as well as the focus groups have met informally to provide additional input. In addition, we've met with the President's Community Advisory Group, we've met with various external stakeholders, and we've also met individually with some faculty and administrators to get additional input. And of course, the President has met with the Board of Governors. So we feel it's been a very comprehensive process and that many of these voices have helped to shape our plan. And I'm not going to walk you through all the detail, but it is available on the website. But we do show all of the various meetings that we have participated in and the different input that we've gotten. Recently, we've met with the President's Cabinet. Today, we will also meet with the Council of Deans. And then we will be beginning what Michael described as the tactical action planning process. The tactical action planning process is a structured way to ensure, as Michael described it, that this plan becomes a reality and is not just a document sitting on the shelf. And so what we, the Barthwell Group, will be doing is meeting with 5 operational unit leaders as well as up to 13 academic unit leaders who are selected by the co-chairs and the Council of the Deans to make sure that their strategic goals and objectives will be aligned with the strategic goals and objectives of the university. So as I said, we've begun the process. We met with the President's Cabinet, today the Council of the Deans, and then we will be holding individual meetings with those unit leaders who elect to meet with us to help them first understand this tactical action planning process and to ensure, after they've reviewed the plan, that they are developing strategic goals and objectives that are aligned with that plan, and then meeting with them a second time to check on progress and to help with completion. So that will conclude what I want to say with you today, except to remind you that we will be having another meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee in December to kind of review the final draft. And as Michael said, in January, we expect to complete the plan as well as the implementation process. So with that, it is my honor to welcome to the stage our president.
Thank you. Thank you. In my first university address, I mentioned that I didn't want to go into a strategic plan immediately because there were a number of things that I knew that we just had to do. It was just staring you in the face, and we just had to get at them. Okay. One of them was student success and services. I think that we made progress in that area. I think some of the numbers do bear that out. Certainly, I don't get the same, the tone of the emails that I get from students now are much more positive than they were at the beginning of the year. But I still think there's a lot of work that we have to do in that area, but I think we made progress there. The second thing was the performance metrics that we're beginning to be increasingly funded by the state. And there was no question that we could not continue with the performance metrics the way they were without adding some additional elements in it. And we wanted to add Pell Grants, either the number of Pell Grants or the percentage of the student population that were eligible for Pell Grants as one of the metrics. And we were successful in getting that done. But again, that's no cause for victory at this time. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do on the metrics. I've been studying metrics a little bit now and looking at what happens at other states and in other institutions. And even though we were funded the third highest this year because of the addition of metrics, we have a bigger budget than a lot of the other institutions. We had the smallest percentage increase of our budget of all the other institutions. And that's not a formula for success going forward. If we continue to have the smallest increase going forward year after year, that's just not going to work. And so there are certain things that we have to work on in terms of the metrics. Certainly research was another area that I felt that we needed to really get after. We've been having declining funding, extramural funding for the past decade now. There were policies and procedures that hadn't been looked at for decades. And I thought that there were just some glaring issues in research that we needed to address. And I feel that we've begun to do that. Some of the policies and procedures that I mentioned have been around for a long time. We're reviewing, and there are some recommendations that will be forthcoming very soon in that regard. Certainly one of the things in terms of the research that I'm hoping that I expect will be in the strategic plan somewhere is that we need to get the CTSA, the Clinical Translational Science Award. My feeling is that any major research institution with a medical school just is not going to be as relevant on the clinical translational science side without the CTSA. And we're not prepared right now. So we're beginning to do the infrastructure to be able to apply competitively for CTSA probably in the end of 2015. So that's what we're trying there. And then finally, student enrollment. And over this past year, we've been really laser focused on student enrollment. This past year, we've had a better year than prior years, more new students than prior years. But again, there's more work to be done there. And one of the things that I'm hoping will come out of the strategic plan is that, there's an optimal number, whether it's 30,000 or 31,000 or whatever. When you get too big, for the number of faculty we have, we don't want to overburden the resources that we have. But there's an optimal number, and I don't know what that is right now, but I'm hoping that that comes out of the strategic plan and that we'll be able to strive for this optimal number, whatever it is. But we have to grow our student enrollment, and we've begun addressing that by changing enrollment management to better align the FIDIACs and the transfer students and the international students. So we hope that over this next year that'll create some increases in our enrollment. So a strategic plan, always starts with a vision and mission. And I felt that we really didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I've seen processes where, people take months arguing about the vision and the mission and wordsmithing. And so we have a placeholder. As you read the vision, obviously there's some things that can be tweaked. Success is used twice in the same sentence, little things like that. But I think the concept is there in terms of what the vision is. And so we'll do some more work in terms of wordsmithing it and making sure that it flows a little bit smoother. And certainly the mission is the same thing. It's almost there. I think the concept is there. There may be a few changes in words here and there, but this was used as a placeholder so that we can get on with the rest of the process. We'll revisit it again now and try to really refine it. So Margaret is going to talk in greater detail about the themes that we have and the objectives and the goals of each of the themes. And when you look at them, I think one of the things that may cross your mind, because it did mine, is that they're pretty broad, and there's not a lot of specificity to some of it. And so I would have two comments about that. One is that that's true, and we do need to add more specificity into some of that. But then the second is what's already been mentioned by Michael and Okosua, which is most of the specificity is going to come in the tactical plan with objective measures. I mean, we have to have objective measures. And so most of that specificity will come in that lower level tactical planning. But having said that, I still think there needs to be a little bit more specificity than what you're going to see. But I just mentioned that because, again, I want you to think of this as a work in progress. We're not, submitting a final strategic plan. This is an interim kind of update kind of a thing to see where we are and solicit some input. There's going to be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of this. And so we hope that we are able to use that time to fine-tune the strategic plan. So the themes that you're going to see is student success. I think that's a fairly obvious one in terms of our having to really focus on that area. My feeling is that one of the areas that we have to really hit hard to make sure that student success is successful is big data and data analytics, predictive analytics. We're beginning to do a little bit of that, but we're not there yet. And so we need to really think about that, more intrusive advising. Those are the kind of things that I think you're going to start seeing in the, under this area. In terms of teaching excellence, again, I think that's a fairly broad theme, but I think one that probably resonates with most of you here. Research. I've mentioned that that's one of the areas that we've had to place some attention on this past year. I think that there's some great opportunities moving forward with the iBio building. We have to get the resources to populate that building, but I've got some ideas in terms of how we might be able to do that. There's certainly going to have to be investments in that area. And by putting investments in that area with a limited pool of resources, some difficult decisions are going to have to be made, because the strategic plan not only should guide you in terms of where you're going to invest, but where you're going to disinvest or not put as much emphasis in, particularly when the resources are limited. But this is an area where we're going to have to put some resources in, because it actually, quite frankly, has just been neglected for a long period of time. Entrepreneurship, some great possibilities here with the Anderson gift for the Ventures Institute that he's creating. There's a buzz. I hear other, that's in the School of Engineering, but I hear other schools now talking about entrepreneurship and somehow collaborating or in some way using that as a catalyst for their own schools. So I think that's an area that has some opportunity. Community engagement. I mentioned I was in Chicago until late last night, and I was there because the School of Medicine was a finalist for the Community Service Award by the AAMC. This is really actually a very big award. I remember when I was at UCLA in Drew many years ago, and we actually won that. The dean at UCLA at the time came up to, when he accepted the award, on behalf of Drew and UCLA. Just that week previously, or 2 weeks previously, one of his faculty at UCLA won the Nobel Prize. And he said that this Community Service Award was as important to him as that Nobel Prize. I still remember that. So this is a fairly big deal. And we didn't win this year, but in my opinion, we should have won. And it was really just an issue of packaging. I think that we do so much in community service, but we didn't package it exactly right. So I think certainly we can't apply next year, but the year after we can apply, and so I expect that we're going to win it at that time. But the community engagement, to me, has got to be something that's not just do more of what we're doing. We're doing a lot, but there has to be a discernible outcome. And I think that outcome has to be something like really transforming the community that we're a part of, improving quality of life, decreasing disparities in health, and increasing lifespan. There has to be, in my opinion, some real tangible outcome as a result of our community engagement. And I think we have the opportunity to do that, and I hope that comes out. Financial sustainability. Certainly our plan has to be underpinned by a firm financial footing. One of the peculiarities about Michigan is that unlike virtually every other state in the nation, there is no higher education coordinating body of some sort, whether it's an advisory body, like in some states like Indiana, or a body that has real authority, like in Texas. So you have a bunch of universities that are both doing their own thing, are very autonomous, and coming up with duplicative programs, medical schools whenever they want to, and there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. And so the business model right now is, quite frankly, get more students. I mean, because there is no coordination between the universities in terms of what we're, some can concentrate on certain things and others, and so we've got to get more students because that is the business model. I think we can leverage Detroit as, well, let me take that back. Up until this morning, when I saw the news that we have the highest crime rate of the murder capital of the country, I thought that we could leverage Detroit in a very positive way to attract students. But that the headline news this morning kind of depressed me a little bit because that does matter. I mean, parents do care when they see that a city has a very high rate of crime, particularly violent crime and death. And it doesn't matter that Midtown is safe. They just look at the headlines. I know because I have a daughter going to USC, and a week or so ago she called me to tell me that her sorority goes to Cancun for spring break. And so she was telling me she's going to go to Cancun. And I said, well, we'll discuss it later. And then, and then I see, on the news again this morning about these 45 Mexican university students that have been abducted and burned or whatever right outside, I guess it was Acapulco. And so I'm saying, no, you're not going, So it does matter. But I do think there are enough positive things going on, particularly with the resolution of the bankruptcy. As I mentioned, I was in Chicago, and everybody was abuzz with that. I mean, it's not just a local phenomenon. It's national. Everybody knows about it. They're reading about it, and there's an optimism that goes well beyond this region. And so I do think there's an opportunity there. Let me concentrate now on something that I was supposed to talk more about, which is values. Because values are the kind of things that you're not going to see most of this as a specific focus area, okay? Because they should permeate the entire strategic plan. They should form the foundation upon which the strategic plan is based. And so I just wanted to talk a few minutes about this. So the first one is, and I didn't really want to prioritize it because they're all very important, but excellence is really, really, really important, okay? I think it's obvious that we have to, in everything we do, we've got to do it with excellence. I mean, that's just, we just have to. And it's not a value that every institution holds. I do think, and I mentioned that was in my second address just not too long ago, that one of the things that I do appreciate about Wayne State, and the reason why that I wanted to be a part of it, is that I do think it's part of the value system of Wayne State. And so, excellence has got to be front and center. Collaboration. Collaboration not only, well, let me say this first in terms of collaboration. One of the things that differentiates us from most of the other public universities in this state is the presence of our professional schools. And I think that we've got to leverage that more in terms of collaborations. So it's not collaborations just in terms of collaborating with the city and external partners, but collaboration within the university with different schools. And a prime example, I think, which we still haven't, I keep getting on the provost all the time because I want to see action on this. We're slowly getting there, but is a bachelor's program in public health. That is collaboration between the School of Medicine and liberal arts and sciences. Everywhere that I know that have done this, that bachelor's program has become the biggest program in the arts and sciences. We did it in Colorado. It's oversubscribed. It's bigger than biology or psychology. Those are usually the two biggest majors. And so I think there are some real opportunities there. But there are opportunities in other ways of collaborating within the university. But also collaborating, not within, but with our external partners, including other universities. And some of you have heard about the BUILD grant, which a consortium of universities just recently got. That was UC Denver, Marygrove, WC3, and us. And I want to certainly acknowledge Ambika Mathur for her role. She was the chief architect in getting all the institutions together and making everybody work together and actually writing the grant so that we were able to get this very, very important grant, which is worth, what, $22 million over the next 5 years. Now, the way the grant is structured, the lead institution has to be a four-year school that has less than $7.5 million of NIH funding. So obviously we couldn't be the lead institution, so we're the research partner. And so some people have asked me, well, why did I really want to put so much emphasis on getting this grant when we're not even the lead, when we don't get the money, it goes to UD Mercy. And the reason is because it's the right thing to do for Detroit. And it's the right thing to do for us as well as the other institutions. By having this grant, it will, I think, make some major pedagogical differences in underrepresented minorities being trained in the sciences and being competitive to go into graduate schools and competing to become NIH-funded scientists ultimately. And we'll be able to get the fruits of that we'll have first dibs because we're the research partner and we'll be able to have access to these students, these bright students as they go through their science training at the undergraduate level, and then when they choose where they're going to go for graduate school in the sciences, we'll have that opportunity to grab them. But it's also just a great thing for Detroit, and that's what I mean by collaboration. We've got to continue to think about these opportunities like that. Innovation is something that's weaved throughout the strategic plan, and innovation is something that it's almost like a buzzword these days, and there's I fear sometimes that when people talk about it, they think of in terms of, you know, kind of a flavor of the month, you know, something that's trendy or something. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking more about a sense of mind that is prepared to, you know, take risk if it's going to possibly result in something that is better, that will result in better teaching, more efficient product outcome at the end. And just a freer mindset to be able to do things differently. And in Chicago, one of the keynote speakers was Alden Alda. Is that his name? Yeah, of MASH. And yeah. What? Yeah, is that what I said? Okay, okay. Anyway, whatever Lou said, okay. MASH, Hawkeye. And one of the things that he did, you know, after MASH, which I didn't know, that he's really interested in science. And so he had this PBS series called American Scientific Foundation or something of that nature. And he interviewed like 700 scientists, you know, just had conversations with them. And so he was saying that one of the scientists that he had interviewed was, you know, someone who really had a lot of background in the Neanderthals and so forth. And so he asked him, he says, well, why is it that the Neanderthals became extinct and that modern man took over? Now, I know that there are probably some anthropologists among you, and you're going to debate this, so that's really not the reason why they became extinct. But what he said, okay, is that the guy told him, he says, because the Neanderthals couldn't innovate. And if they did innovate, they couldn't communicate it with others. They stayed in their, you know, cave 12 or whatever they were in, and didn't socialize enough to be able to pass along that innovation. So that's just an example of how important innovation is, I think, is to move things forward. Diversity and inclusion, again, you know, it certainly is a big part of our history. You know, we're in a very inclusive university over the entire course of the history, and we continue to be. But I think that, you know, to me, it's not just an issue. I hear the rationale for why we should be diverse sometimes, you know, go something like this, that, you know, we're in the most diverse city in the country, or the one with the most African Americans in the country, and so our universities should mirror that diversity. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not debating that. But I think there's a more compelling reason why diversity and inclusion is important. And what that is that it provides for a better experience for our students so that when they go out, they're better prepared to face the global society that they're going to become a part of and will be able to contribute to that society optimally. That's the reason. Because when you have a diverse, inclusive environment, you get different input, you get different perspectives. And almost always, when you have different perspectives, you make different decisions that are the right decisions that lead to better outcomes. That's why it's important. So you don't have to be a social liberal to embrace diversity. I think just purely on pragmatic grounds, on business grounds, it's very, very compelling. Certainly also, in my case, and I'm sure in many of you, there's also a social, moral issue to that too. But compelling, there's compelling reasons for this being a core value without even invoking that aspect of it. And then integrity. Integrity is just, you know, doing the right thing, right? Being accountable to others, being accountable to the university, and perhaps, I think, most importantly, being accountable to yourself, being a good steward of taxpayers' dollars. One of the distinguishing features, I think, of humans, unlike, you know, most of our you know, animal counterparts, is, you know, we do have a sense of social morals and right and wrong, and you know, to me, it's just integrity is just doing the right thing, and that has to always be the underpinnings upon which we function. So, you know, the values are something that is easy to talk about, but it's sometimes really hard to incorporate as part of an organization, and it's certainly very difficult to change. It can be done, but it's difficult to change. The good thing, I think, is that to at least some extent, each one of these values up here, you know, we already believe in. It's already a part of us. So it's not like we have to change anything. But what we do have to do is continue to be guided by them, continue to think about them, continue to reflect on them, and the decisions that we make, just make sure that the foundation upon which those decisions are made has their underpinnings in these values. So I don't think that's a far stretch for us. You know, we're basically there in terms of believing that these values are important. So throughout the strategic plan, you'll see that these values are incorporated as part of it. It's not going to be a specific, you know, thing that says innovation, but it'll be incorporated in the other goals and objectives. So let me just stop there, and I think, Margaret, are you up next? Great. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to make a couple of brief remarks which are global, and from there I will walk us through the plan in terms of its focal areas, the 6 areas under which we have grouped what the steering committee, the advisory groups, and others feel are the ways forward for Wayne State. The first comment, and it's one that I think is very important, is that not everything here is new. It's not as if we're saying Wayne State is starting from zero, we haven't been doing anything, we have to do all of this from scratch. As we developed the plan, I kept worrying about that. There are various degrees of innovation here in the sense of novelty, and various degrees of saying, this is important, we have to keep on doing it, we have to make it better. The second point, and this is sort of to get ahead of the question and comment section, is that not everything will be mentioned. And not everything will show up in the plan eventually as a university-wide strategic plan. As many of you know, I come out of languages and linguistics. I think all students should have a second foreign language, or third even, and a good solid basis in linguistics. Well, that's not going to be there. I got outvoted on that one. But the important thing is that I've been going around with my colleague Lou Romano, who's the president of the Academic Senate. We visited almost all the schools and colleges now. We have 2 more to go. And in almost every one of the comments has been, well, why didn't you mention this? Why didn't you mention that? We can't mention everything. However, and this goes back to what everybody has said so far, we have only just begun on the tactical implementation aspect of the plan. In fact, we will in some ways begin between 11:30 and 1 today when the Council of Deans meets and talks about it. And there's plenty that will go into the detail, the very important detail that what you won't see either today or in the finished university-wide plan. So, that having been said, what I want to do is walk you through in a little bit of detail, more than the president's walkthrough, but not as much as if we could sit here and talk about this for an hour or so. What's in the focal areas of the plan? And the one other thing I want to add is that as we got to fleshing out the focal areas, we set up subcommittees. And each of the subcommittees had 3-4 members of the steering committee, and in addition had 3 or 4 more faculty, mostly faculty, a couple of staff members. So the focal area, in addition to the various input that Akosia talked about, there's the fact that the subcommittees had a great deal to say about how the plan would look. So lots of faculty input, not in the steering committee perhaps as much as one might have hoped, but certainly in building these focal areas. Student success is the first one, and I'm not going to read them to you. I'm simply going to talk a little bit about what I consider to be a couple of important points. First of all, we're working on a concept that we have called distinctively Wayne. And this goes to, I believe, the very first speech President Wilson made when he talked about the fact that the attributes of Wayne State University included the fact that it was a research-extensive university, that it had a real presence in health research, and that it was situated in the city of Detroit and Southeast Michigan with a mission as a university for the region as well as for outside the region. And distinctively Wayne, is what captures all of this. Students are our first priority, and we have a great deal that we're doing already, a great deal we can build on, and a great deal more we should be doing. I'll simply point out a couple of them for the students, undergraduates first, and then say a word about the graduate students when I get to teaching, probably. The undergraduates are well served in many areas. There's more we can do. One of my goals is to see that not only does every program have a 4-year pathway to graduation, but that we take away the barriers, like courses not given often enough or courses given at the same time, which are required for a single degree, which on the university side would be barriers to success. And success is graduation. We want them to go away and go away with a good degree. Another point that I'll make right now is that we want, of course, everything that happens while they're here to be of excellence and of keeping students in the center. So an early alert system, those of you who are faculty here and teach 1 and 2,000 level courses know, of course, about the early alert system that faculty can trigger. There is a great deal more that can be done when students are floundering in the first few weeks of the semester, where advisors come in, where the faculty come in, where we set up a program that catches students early and has a whole series of supports for them before they flounder too much. So those would be the student success side. The other one I would add is that we have to remember we're more than just of Detroit and of Southeast Michigan, though that is of utmost importance. We're also of the world. Jokes aside about foreign languages for everyone, we have in the plan that there should be more opportunities both for study abroad and for interaction with the many foreign entities, businesses, things like the Gallo-American, the French-American Chamber of Commerce, which are here. Our students need to see beyond Detroit and beyond Southeast Michigan. The other side of student success is teaching excellence. We have a strong teaching faculty, many very, very devoted to the students. We need to help them do more. The president mentioned data analytics. Data analytics need to be used not only on the faculty side, but on the student side. We need to be doing more support for innovative pedagogies with respect for what works in different areas. We also have to look at what the world's doing to change pedagogies. One of my complaints has always been, since I noticed it, that faculty treat teaching as a private act. Research is a public act. You don't do your research for yourself. The one friend I have who did it ended up as a department secretary in a department because she didn't want to publish. It was just for her. But teaching is treated quite the opposite, and I have the same instincts myself as a faculty member. I don't want to be observed by a peer. I don't like to look at my student evaluations. I mean, they could be negative. We have to get beyond that mindset and talk about the collaborative side of teaching. Team teaching, teaching mentoring, sharing ideas, all of the above. And this is written into the plan under teaching excellence. The third piece is research, and I think the President has touched on many of the issues, many of the matters that are in the strategic plan about research. Again, it has to be more emphasis on our strengths, maybe less emphasis, but I would still say respect for kinds of research that are not mainstream. And as a historical linguist, I know all about research that's not mainstream. It's not even fashionable in linguistics, but respect and support. We need, in the areas that work this way, we need better infrastructure. The iBio building is an immense hopeful sign, but we need more infrastructure in the buildings we have. We need more support for research. So infrastructure, and one other thing which Vice President Lanier, who couldn't be here today, talks about a lot and has me excited, is an office for research support, not for pre and post grant support, financial bookkeeping support and advice, but for many of us in areas that where we aren't trained in grantsmanship but should be, the kind of mentoring, the kind of advising, the kind of possibilities of guidance that Wayne State hasn't done so far. And I'm excited about that one as a piece of the plan and something that we will help grow other aspects of research at Wayne State. And I forgot. Entrepreneurship. As the President said, and we've all been saying all along, there's an immense amount that has been going along in certain areas. There have been, again, this is one of these things where it feels like private industry, not in the sense of corporate or anything, but private areas around the university, pockets of entrepreneurship. I am very happy that a group of the deans are now meeting to talk about possibly a degree program, certainly interaction of students and entrepreneurial activities on campus and off campus, obviously. Let's dream a little bit and say that we can go from there to a wider structured council for entrepreneurship, led by the deans who are involved now and others, and our Vice President for Economic Development. There's all kinds of possibilities here. The next one, and I'm linking them together by talking a little faster as I do the bridge, is community engagement. Same sort of issues. There's an awful lot going on. But if you ask us centrally what's going on, I have been at meetings where we've all sort of thrown our hands up. We can list an issue here, you know, a activity here, an activity there. I'm very glad to say that we have some Kresge Foundation money to put together a website, a spreadsheet for community engagement. We should have websites also with links to various activities. It's a matter of Wayne State being not just in Detroit, but of Detroit. In Southeast Michigan, of Southeast Michigan. Between entrepreneurship and community engagement, I think our biggest fault right now is we don't know what we're doing, in the sense of there's no central repository for information. There's a great deal that can happen. And with that, to go back to Wayne State's role in the area, we will be able to increase our visibility, not just for the individual activities, and there's a lot going on there, but also for the university itself as an entrepreneurial, as heavily engaged in the community, because we'll be able to speak to it, we'll be able to enhance university-wide programs. Finding out what we're doing is a first step, and there's plenty to do from there. Finally, among the thrusts is financial sustainability. And again, I will add to what the president said. He talked about growing enrollment. We have, and I know all of you have heard this fact before, but in the last, well, I got here 12 years ago, and Wayne State 12 years ago got 65 approximately % of its support from the state of Michigan. 2/3. It is now at 33%, 1/3. For many, many reasons, and this goes to excellence and integrity and all the other values, we can't raise tuition very much. And in fact, in some areas, we're looking at where we can reduce extra tuition. What else can we do? More students is one of it, and I echo the president's statement that we have to figure out as part of this planning process and beyond what the right number is. I would stick my neck out and say bigger than it is now, but I'm not going to stick my neck out and give you a number beyond that. We also have to find financial sustainability through philanthropy, through increased research, and through, let's see, that's usually called the four-legged stool of university. Yes, tuition, state support, philanthropy, and research. State support is growing very modestly. Tuition has to grow with more students, not with higher tuition. Philanthropy and research, we have plenty we can be doing. And of course, the capital campaign is the real launch of what we're aiming at in philanthropy. So, and I would add one more thing here, which we've been using financial sustainability as the short title for this focal area, but it's financial sustainability and operational excellence. And I'm sure everyone in this room has some ideas about where Wayne State is doing things absolutely right and where we could improve. Also in the plan. There will be discussion later about tactical implementation, tactical planning. I'm not going to dwell on it. I would invite all of you to visit the website, read in much more detail. What you have on these slides, and what you've probably been quickly reading as I talk, are the entry statement to each of the focal areas and the goals. Under the goals, you'll find on the website, are somewhat more detailed objectives. And I'm not sure if it's up yet, but we are also working on metrics for each of the objectives. It is a very complex and sort of like an old-fashioned outline. You have Roman numeral 1, then big letter A, then Arabic number 1, then small letter A, and then you go to lowercase Roman numerals. Well, this plan is feeling that way. So let me try summing up, and in the name of research integrity, I will give credit where credit is due. Lou Romano has, as I said, and I have been going around to the schools and colleges. Lou gets the last word every time and complains that I've taken all his words away. But the one thing that he says at the end, and I am quoting with permission, is that we can sum all this complexity up, in addition to the values, with 2 words. One of them is in the values: excellence and relevance. The president talked about excellence. I think that in everything you've heard today, in everything that you have, when you read the plan, you have an interweaving of excellence as well as the other values. When Lou talks about relevance, he makes a very important point, which is that if Wayne State doesn't continue to be relevant to our students, to the faculty, to the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan, let's think about relevance in funding as well as everything else, we're not going to move forward. This is not to say we give up old-fashioned, I'm using scarecrow quotes, disciplines in just for the trendy and then keep moving with the trendy. That's not what I mean by relevance, and I know that's not what Lou means. It's the quality of the education, the quality of the faculty, all these goals rolled up into something that makes sense on campus and off campus. And with those words, I will stop, and I believe Michael comes up next.
Actually, I'm going to invite some other folks up to the table. We're going to use this time for input and Q&A. I've got quite a bit that's come through via the website, and if there's any streaming information, Lisa or Jen, if you could bring that to me as well. Lou Romano is joining us. Hakosia, Mr. President, you're welcome to join us too. You can always talk from the chair. You can do whatever you like. And by the way, I'm not nervous anymore.
I don't think there's another chair there. Is
No, that's your chair.
Okay, I'll come up then.
I'm going to stand. And it might be helpful, perhaps, just to get us kicked off, if I can share just a couple of things that came across the website. One, and it's related to the mission and the vision and the values. And it's my question, so I know how to answer it. The vision statement is great and should be hung in every office and department throughout Wayne State University. Part of the rollout of the strategic plan, and an important part, is the communication of it. We talked about Neanderthals. They're gone because they couldn't innovate or communicate. Well, we can innovate and we can communicate, and it's going to be important, especially with the values that the president talked about, because we have to live these things. This is how we work together. This is how we get it done. So we're going to try to make sure we have discussions across the university, that we put these things online, that we put them in every conference room. But we, as the leaders of the university, have to live this. It's real critical. I'm going to start with one other, Margaret, if you don't mind. I think this falls into you. First-year students are particularly vulnerable to vanishing from our campus. Small, high-quality seminars are an expensive but proven tool for engaging students, and are one of the best tools for ensuring that each new student makes a significant connection with a faculty member in his or her first year. Research has shown that students succeed at high rates when they make such a connection with a faculty member. Margaret, would you care to comment on that?
I think that in an ideal world, we would have freshman seminars for all freshmen. I think that's certainly a goal to move toward. There's a more important point in there, though, and that is that freshmen and all other students, and I'm talking from freshmen all the way up through graduate students being mentored in a lab, need connection, need relationships. And I mentioned the Kresge Grant before. There is money in the Kresge Grant as well to work on bringing faculty and staff into programs of mentoring, of participation. A very low-level dream is for every faculty member to know every student's name in his or her class in the first couple of weeks and recognize them when they come to their office hours. But we will be working on programs beyond classroom and office hours that will address this very, very important point, and I hope we will be able to manage, if not in the next year or so, but down the road, to have these seminars for all students.
Anybody else want to add to that? Is there a question or feedback from the audience? We have microphones on either side. If you wish, you can come to the microphone. Do I see a hand? Yep, please.
Yes, I'd like to know, you spoke of bringing in more students. I would like to know how you plan to bring in more students without increasing the teacher-student ratio in each class.
Margaret, do you want to take a shot at that?
I guess this one comes to me. In some cases, we can't start with the negative. There'll be times when we will have to increase teacher-student ratio, and the we is not me. When we talk about avoiding everything being top-down, this is a perfect example of it. But I will challenge, and I'll probably say this at the Council of Deans when we meet in about an hour, I will challenge thoughtful consideration of class size. Not all classes should be made larger, some can. And it's interwoven with thoughtful consideration of pedagogies. Sometimes pedagogies can be tweaked, and then class size isn't an issue anymore. Another point to this, and this is one I've had many discussions with the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences, who has an awful lot of undergraduates in his college, pre-major and major, is thinking about how we can employ more lecturers. People who are actively interested, not in lieu of tenure and tenure track faculty, as much as we can manage given our financial situation, but when we think about lecturers as opposed to part-timers. Lecturers have these relationships with students. Lecturers, in my experience, play an enormous role in retention. So there are various ways around it that are not just saying, okay, from now on, I'll pick my own, French 1010 has to have 40 students instead of 27. We can find, maybe French 1010 can't, but maybe a more advanced course in French culture, which is more lecture, can. So thoughtfulness, innovation, I'm back at the values, working as groups. So collaboration and communication.
I just finished reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. And one of the things that he talks about there is that it's a myth that smaller classrooms are better, and that there really is no correlation with it if you look at it objectively. I'm not going to argue whether that's true or not, but I do have a question though, Rob. The high point in terms of our number of students was about what, 33? 32,000. Yeah, okay, and okay, so let's go the recent past. Let's go the recent past. So it's around 32,000 or so, and has the number of faculty decreased proportionally to the number of students that's decreased?
No, the faculty is actually gone up.
Right. So that's the point I was making. So they actually, we've got less students now, but more faculty, and so there's capacity.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Hi, Alexei Petrov, physics. I'd like to follow up on that question. With all of the goals that are stated here, which are fantastic, the university, any university, is defined by its faculty. So while putting more teachers in a classroom might be important, we have to do other things as well. You cannot grow research enterprise with lecturers. You cannot do outreach with lecturers. Growing faculty size is important. And compared to other universities of similar sizes, faculty also have better support in terms of teaching assistants, in terms of other things. We have to innovate to stay in competition with them. So my question is, do you envision that we actually will grow the size of the faculty at Wayne State at some point?
What do we envision growing the size of the faculty? A research enterprise that's growing, is going to require more faculty? You can't do it with lecturers.
Right. So I would agree with that totally. And when I mentioned earlier that for research that we're going to have to make some investments there, mainly I'm talking about faculty. You know, we are going to need to hire more research faculty. And I just think that we're just going to have to find the resources and just do it. So I would agree with you in terms of that. And we've got to then make sure that we support the faculty that we do have with the, you know, the right research infrastructure to support them. That means, you know, common core labs, different instrumentation that people can use, support services in the research office. You know, some of the things that we're thinking about now that has, you know, really just hasn't taken place over the past couple of decades.
And I'd just like to underline what I said, which is when I talked about lecturers, I said in place of part-time faculty. I was not talking about replacing tenured and tenure-track faculty with lecturers. I was thinking about the student success side. Potentially, it could free up faculty time for tenured faculty time and tenure track for research. But there's a balance there, and none of these focal areas, I mean, if there were a way of doing it in layers to show how they interact, our linear language doesn't allow us to do it. But it's, you don't just, it's not full stop, go into a totally different category when you go from teaching to research or from those to student success, or really any of the others.
I would add this related comment. Going through the plan, there's always the question, in every meeting we had, how are you going to pay for this? Because it can look that we're adding a whole bunch of stuff, and all that stuff costs money. So hiring new tenured faculty certainly costs money. Part of the tactical planning is trying to find the financial trade-offs. First, identifying the financial and prioritizing what are we going to spend on, and then trying to find those trade-offs. What can we stop doing? Strategic planning is a matter of priorities. You can't afford to do everything, so what can you afford to do? And obviously, that's a very important one, so I just wanted to add that. A hand in the back? Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question which basically touches on a couple of things we just discussed, but basically it's about enrollment, growing enrollment. And we all know that the demographics in the Southeast Michigan area does not look very, let's say, promising for growing the enrollment. We're looking at about 10 to 20% reduction in high school population in the next 10 years. We have a Great Lakes initiative, but again, the states around the Great Lakes are also not demographically growing at this point. We have more and more competition from other universities, not all of them in the Southeast region, some of them as far away as, say, Grand Valley State. So there's real challenges of growing the enrollment around here. I'm wondering if there's any plans of reaching a little bit beyond, we should really be a national university, I mean, with our research, with our unique programs that we have, to make our, you know, say, tuition structure somewhat more competitive to actually attract students from states where the population actually is increasing, such as, you know, California, Texas, and places like that. Is there any plans or any thoughts about that?
I can start that if you like. First, we think we've got something here that other Michigan universities don't have. And I'm not sure that's been recognized. And we deserve a little bit better share of what's going on, even among what might be declining demographics. And yes, we have the Great Lakes Scholarship and other things. We've got to communicate more broadly, and we've got to recruit more broadly. Rob Cormans is sitting here, and feel free to comment on that, Rob. But before you do, if you've traveled the state in the past few months, you may have seen Wayne State messaging beyond Southeast Michigan. We don't have a giant budget for marketing, but we do know we have to expand our footprint beyond Southeast Michigan. So you'll see that we're telling the state and on those highways coming in and out of the state that there's a premier university, and it's right here in Detroit. Last night's news about the violent crime in Detroit is not great, but there are a lot of things about Detroit that are interesting for the right reason, and we think that makes Wayne State a more attractive place. I know that the admissions team is spending a lot of time going outside the borders of Southeast Michigan and Detroit now to try to connect with those people. For the Great Lakes, we don't have the marketing budget to go advertise in Chicago, but we are testing different digital ways to get a hold of people through click-through, click for pay-per-click and search terms and things like that, just to try to extend our message. Let me offer it to anybody else who'd like to comment.
So one thing, if you go to the website and look at the details of the strategic plan in the financial sustainability section, you will see that we are establishing goals for not only overall enrollment, but elements of the student population. 10% coming from international, for example, 10% from domestic out of state. So there will be plans to target those kind of populations and grow those populations in recognition of the fact that the demographics is what it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was so excited about what I thought of to say.
That's okay, Margaret.
We'll put it between us and I won't move it again. We also just launched the capital campaign, and as some of you know, we launched the campaign, we're launching the campaign not just through the event that many of you came to here on campus, but also with regional launches all over the country where we have alumni. This is a way in which we are engaging alumni far out of southeastern Michigan who will help us with recruitment.
I would add to Rick's comment, too, that transfer students are an important component of Wayne State enrollment, and we are spending a lot of time creating very productive relationships with Macomb, with Oakland Community College, with, what's that one out in Livonia? Thank you, Schoolcraft. I went there for a class, I should know that. So that's a big thing, and we're trying to piece those all together to get to an enrollment that we think is healthy. We actually did put a stake in the ground at 30,000 enrollment. We have been there in the recent past. We certainly think we've got capacity, but that's what we're aiming at for the moment. Anybody else have anything to add on enrollment? Okay. We just got a question in from online, from our online folks, and I think it was related to what I was talking about. Our former provost said we were trying to do too much with too little. Will this change? Well, this is about, do we have the appropriate resources? Well, we do have to make trade-offs, is what I was talking about before. I don't think things are going to get easy. Suddenly we're going to be rolling in the dough or anything, but does anybody want to comment on resources and the ability to do what we need to do?
I'll just say this, that you know, it's easy to bring on new programs. It's very difficult to get rid of programs. But I do think that we've got to have some discipline in that area. You know, we've got to look at everything and make sure that the dollars that we're spending are being spent optimally, and that that all programs be looked at and evaluated as part of the process.
And I would also say that the purpose of strategic planning is not just to decide what you are going to do, but it's to decide what you're not going to do. Those hard choices, they're coming, and it's going to be an interesting and a tough process in some ways to decide what can't we afford. If we have to do these things, maybe we can't do these things. Question?
Michael, I have one. First of all, I'd like to compliment Roy on his openness and his willingness to engage in this and to present himself here vulnerable to various kinds of points of view. around. I don't want to get too far into the weeds of actual performance, but it's interesting. Suddenly, the lecturers have begun to play, quote, a key role in the rhetoric around here. They have never played a key role in terms of their emphasis, in terms of what they do. I've been through negotiations for a long time about rhetoric, about trying to improve their lot. There are lecturers who have been here for 20 years, and throughout most of that time, they were on one-year contracts, not knowing whether or not they would be appointed for the next year. A past president that expanded the number of lecturers at the expense of faculty said that they were there for flexibility, by which he meant they were easily fired when we were in hard times financially. But right now, we reward them annually in terms of salary by putting them in with the salaries of committees of departments, which are run by faculty. Faculty reward people in terms of what they see as the most important thing, and that is primarily research, despite the fact that we've divided up the increments in selective between research, teaching, and service. But I think that it behooves the administration to think in an integrated way about these people. There are 140, 150 of them. It varies each year. And if they're going to bear the brunt of a lot of the teaching of undergraduates, we have to pay a little more organizational attention to them, as we need to pay attention to others who are key to the development and of the various kinds of implementation of the various kinds of goals we have. They are poorly paid. They exist in uncertain economic situation in terms of their continuation. And I think that the administration really does need to pay a much greater attention to this. Now that's getting a little bit into the weeds, but we are going to get into the weeds about a lot of other things in terms of these things. And I would just encourage a broader look at some of these kinds of issues.
Anybody like to comment on that? Thank you.
Just to say thank you, and I think that you're making very good points, Charlie.
I just want to answer this quick question, and then Ness, we'll get to you. I've seen your hand up there. Online, they've asked if you thought about including the student body in this planning process. The answer is yes. We did have a student who sat on the steering committee, and we also had a group of students who met several times through the process and also met with their counterparts to provide input into this process. Yes, sir.
Hi, my interest is in the environment. I want to know what you're doing about the environmental impact of this university, and are there any sustainability plans, anticipated climate change? Was that part of this strategic plan anywhere? Because I came to the last meeting and it wasn't included, and I still haven't seen it included in this, but I haven't had a chance to look at the updated website.
Right. Did you also submit that question online? I was just about to read it. I've got several questions on sustainability. You're going to get that question in one way or another. I appreciate that. Rick, could you comment on that, please?
Can I have a microphone? Thanks. Sustainability, we have an Office of Sustainability that is part of our facilities planning and management organization. I see our director is sitting up in the back. In terms of talking about specifics, objectives for sustainability, I think you'll see that in the tactical action plan that comes out, because it's got to be embedded in a lot of the areas that we have been talking about so far. It hasn't made it into the summary level overall objectives. That's probably something that we should go back and reconsider, whether we need to have a mention of that somewhere. But I think you'll clearly see some sustainability initiatives and actions that are laid out in the tactical action plan.
We're at a time where we were going to come to we were going to close this. Any one more burning question, perhaps?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, Lou. You have to go sit out in the audience to ask a question.
Well, I was going to ask and answer it.
Because no one asked me anything. So the question is, why should faculty buy into this, right? Because if you look at all of the goals, most of them are going to be accomplished by the faculty. I mean, administrators will organize and prod, and if they don't, they'll get fired, but the faculty aren't going to get fired. We have tenure, and so you really have to wonder what's in it for us, other than making us feel good. And I'll say that it seems to me that without additional resources, it's becoming harder and harder for us to do our jobs. I was on the Budget Hearing Committee this past spring, and it was tragic to see so many good colleges being cut, and a lot of them were faculty lines. So to answer a question about faculty and student-faculty ratio, we need tenured and tenure-track faculty to do these things. This can't be done with part-time faculty, and most of it can't be done with lecturers. If we're going to have research programs, if we're going to have students working in labs with faculty, these are going to be tenured full-time faculty who are going to do that kind of work. If we're going to have innovation and research grants increases, that's going to be done by mostly by tenured and tenure-track faculty. And so we need resources to hire new faculty. We can't do this with the current faculty level. And when you hire new faculty, you bring in new blood and new ideas, new curricular ideas, new research collaborations. It just can't be done with the current workforce we have. We have to think about ways to increase that so we can do our jobs. We can't do it. We can't increase our graduate programs because we don't have the resources for teaching assistantships and fellowships, and many of our graduate programs are starved for this. We can't support students. Students take 10 years, 12 years to get a PhD degree. It's ridiculous because they have to work full-time to support themselves. So we need a mechanism to bring all these things to fruition, and the best way to do it is through new resources. Now, how do we get new resources? Well, teaching our students very well and making students want to come here and have them successful and get good jobs, that will increase, I think, student enrollment. But I think the point that Margaret made that I kept emphasizing when I went around to the colleges is that we really need to make Wayne State relevant to the state, because we cannot survive when we are the lowest % increase every year in state funding. And we're going to have to start depending on increased state funding. And I think that the governor has pledged to increase higher education funding in the coming years. I think that we need to get our fair share, maybe even our better than our fair share. We need to increase that. And the best way to do that is to show that the university is relevant to the city and the state by showing that we're educating students well, we're coming up with new research programs that bring in money into the state and educate graduate students to go out and get good jobs. And we have innovative ideas that result in technology transfer, that maybe grow new companies. We have to show community engagement where we actually are relevant to the city in terms of how we work with city government and the people in the city. So if we're relevant and we publicize that, it seems to me that at that point, it's going to be very hard for the state to keep saying, you know, Wayne State doesn't deserve any more money because they're just not, you know, a qualified, competent university. And we can reverse that. I think we can reverse this downward trend in funding, increase our funding, and then that will enable all the faculty to have a better chance at doing the things that they like to do.
Thank you, Lou. Before I turn it over to Rick, I just wanted to say thank you for participating in this process. And to all those who have been part of the strategic planning process, thank you. The work continues, but it's been great so far. If you have more input, please go to wayne.edu/strategic plan and enter it. Everything that's come online via the invitation or on the site is being noted and discussed. So we'll get to all that. At this time, folks, you can sit down if you like. Rick Nork is going to close us out with a little bit on the tactical planning situation. Oh, and while they're doing that, there's a question came in, what can staff do? Maybe it's what can we all do to help? First, participate in this process, because we're going to make decisions to live the values that the president talked about. And then, do the hard work to move us forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Finally, my own microphone. So you've heard a lot in the last hour or so about the sort of a high-level summary of a lot of work that's been done by a lot of people over the last 5 or 6 months or so. And we really appreciate the efforts of the steering committee. A number of members are in the audience today, and a number of focus groups that have participated that have brought us to this point today. So what's next? That has been a lot of hard work, and there's still more to come. And what that is to develop a tactical action plan. And the tactical action planning process is one that we're going to follow for each unit in the university to ensure that all of our goals and objectives are aligned with the overall university strategic goals and objectives. And we're going to proceed through this with the purpose of creating a tactical action plan, and we'll do this on an annual basis then for each unit. It's cascading the goals down through the organization, focusing on the vital few objectives that each of us can help to achieve. Jim Sears is looking at me, he's heard some of this before. And then develop the specific plans that we will all embrace and work towards to accomplish the strategic goals. So the way we're going to do that, Akostia mentioned previously that there'll be 5 groups of operating departments that will meet individually with the Barthwell group to start this planning process. Each of the 13 schools and colleges will have a separate meeting with the dean and certain members of the planning unit within the school and college. And the goal of that would be to develop this tactical action plan that includes specific implementation steps and metrics. And there's been a lot of discussion about, okay, so how we pay for this. And one of the questions that came in, and it's a topic that we had Michael addressed briefly, the president addressed as well, and that we had a lot of conversation about during our steering committee meetings. The first thing that we have to do is, in conjunction with the budget office and Rob Corman, we will determine the resources that are required to implement the strategic plan. So that's got to come after a lot of the tactical actions have been identified and developed, because it won't be until we actually have those tactics that we know where we'll need additional resources in order to implement those tactics. And then to get to the question that came from the online audience before, we need to evaluate opportunities to redeploy existing resources towards the implementation of strategic goals. President mentioned it's always easier to start a new program than to end an existing one. But that's got to be what we have to look at and find ways to not just add, but redeploy what we have in areas where we think are the greatest strategic payback for the university. At the end of the day, that's not going to get us everything we need, so we'll have to prioritize and identify new funding sources as part of the FY16 budget process, which, as Michael mentioned, we're targeting to have this complete in January. The budgeting process is going to start in March anyway, and so that will be the vehicle that we use to identify what the resources are that are required and find a way during the budgeting process to try to prioritize and fund as many of those things as we can. So that's the summary of the next steps. Again, I want to encourage all of you to visit the website. We thank you for your participation today, and if you have any input that you would like to provide, go to the website, provide comments. You can reach out to any of the co-chairs as well, and give us your feedback, or directly to the Barthwell group. So with that, we'll close. Thanks again for your participation and attendance.